Disclaimer, I own nothing!
Much like everyone else on the planet in the coming weeks, I just saw the epic conclusion finale to the biggest and longest spanning saga in all of film. 11 years worth of awesome movies, and also Doctor Strange, dozens of hours of TV shows that nobody likes but still get multiple seasons somehow, 5 Netflix shows that get severely ignored, and 1 weird Hulu series, I guess, all building up to this point. This momentous final installment, except they have a dozen more planned, and I have to say, I loved it. It was stupid, batshit insane, and an illogical mess, and that's exactly what makes the comic books it was based on so amazing. So let's reel it back for a second. This and Infinity War are actually the only 2 movies in the past 5 or 6 years that I managed to avoid spoilers for, and I feel like that immensely added to the experience. Granted, I read the comics these were based on, and I've spent enough time watching movies that I guess pretty much every major plot twist across both those films, but it's not about the surprise of the moment. Sometimes it's just about seeing how we develop to those conclusions, and that's what mainstream audiences have been doing for the past 11 years. Watching this massive and epic story develop and unfold, and it feels like pretty much all of it mattered here and there, except for maybe the first Hulk and kinda Captain Marvel? I didn't even see that one, and I totally understood everything going on. Carol's tough, that's all you gotta know. Hell, even Thor the Dark World somehow played a part in all this. And I feel like that's the most universally hated installment of the MCU just because it was so meh. The MCU has had a lot of meh pieces here and there, but even the callbacks to those felt touching and respectful in Endgame. Every few minutes I felt myself gasping with excitement when I saw something familiar and going, oh, no way, they're bringing that character in? I think that's the ultimate benefit of the MCU. As much as we like to complain about how interconnected these movies are and how they don't make sense if you don't see the majority of them, that's the point of serialized storytelling. The MCU's grand design was never to be a series of one-offs, but more like an epic big-budget anthology TV series that was released theatrically with the episodes spanning 2 or 3 hours each. The Avengers films serve as season finales, and they just ended season 3 with a really wacky 2-parter. It's an ambitious idea to tell such a big story this way, but I think upon finally seeing what they were all building up to, the execution worked, and I have to give major props to all the creative minds behind this universe. Crafting every little character arc, every small setup and payoff, and every little detail to flesh out this massive world. I made peace with the fact that this won't be a direct adaptation of the comics a long while ago, and I stopped going into these films expecting to see all my favorite comic moments faithfully recreated by handsome shirtless men named Chris. This has really cemented itself as its own thing from the comics by taking such a drastic new direction with the plots, and that's perfectly okay. No one ever complained that the Ultimate comics were different from the original ones. The point was for it to be a reimagining with its own rules and its own lore. But just like both those universes, the MCU has let its grasp on realism dissipate with time as audiences become more and more accepting of this insane alternate world where literally anything can happen. It's a big step to get a viewer to accept a concept as wild as space aliens, and an even bigger one to make them believe in magic, but to do both in the same series of movies and have it come across as something grand and emotional, instead of hilariously awful, is nothing short of a miracle. Endgame in particular is a culmination of a few dozen absolutely insane ideas that somehow commingled brilliantly. It feels just like a big event from a real Marvel comic, because it has a ton of characters that are so fun to see interacting in different dynamics. It makes up rules and throws big ideas at you in the blink of an eye. Its pacing is bonkers and never lets up with the next moment having you go, oh shit! And it's ultimately a very stupid and illogical story that they tell like it's Shakespeare. Cape comics like Marvel and DC are the best place to go for stories that are completely silly but take themselves deadly seriously. And that's sort of why comics are so fun and special. Comics make suspension of disbelief a complete non-element with their creativity, and that's certainly not for everyone, but I for one love them for it. I celebrate and embrace the absurdity, because at the end of the day, even if the world makes no sense and the events are hilariously impossible, the emotion is real for these characters. The heroes and villains feel the weight of this, and to them it's no laughing matter. To them it's life and death. And we love these characters because their personalities are so well crafted and developed that they feel real. When the characters feel real, it doesn't matter if the situation they're in is so hard to grasp, because they anchor you to the emotion of that story. We feel for these characters despite their setting, and I have a feeling that's why I cried my eyes out by the end of this movie, and why I think most people who see it will too. My biggest problems with the films across the MCU were the ones that felt too afraid to break out of established formulas and patterns, or were too ashamed to embrace the insanity of their inspiration. But Endgame doesn't have that problem. It doesn't just follow a set formula we've seen 1,000 times. It doesn't strive to feel like a homogenized and generic origin story like Doctor Strange or Ant-Man. And it doesn't have any fear or shame in celebrating every dumb idea that's been given to us in this series. The MCU doesn't always work, but when it does, it really works. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has definitely had its low points, and I've been very critical of the moments when it's faltered, but only because I had such high expectations for it. I truly believed that they could do something that's never been seen in a film series before, and my love of the source material and my hopes for them made it especially frustrating when there are face-planting failures in the franchise. Yet despite the issues it's had and the way it's shaken under the impossible weight of its giant ideas, the series has managed to pull off the most important part of any good story: the ending. Go check it out.